The Vorthani Imperium had ruled the stars for 40,000 years. It controlled 12,000 worlds. Its fleets had crushed every species that ever stood against it. So, when the Imperial scouts found a small blue planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy, they did not think much of it. The planet was called Earth. The species there called themselves humans. The scouts looked at them and laughed. These creatures had only just started traveling between their own planets. They had no large fleet. They had no empire. They were, by every Imperial standard, weak. The report went up the chain of command. It reached High Magna Veshtul, one of the most respected commanders in the Imperium. He read it while drinking spiced wine in his command chair. He smiled. This would be an easy mission. A quick conquest. Maybe 2 months of work, then a long vacation on a pleasant world. Prepare the subjugation fleet, he told his officers. We leave at dawn. 800 warships left the staging system 3 days later. Each ship was the size of a city. Each one carried weapons that could crack a planet open. The fleet jumped through subspace and arrived in the Sol system on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. Veshtul expected the usual reaction: panic, fear, world leaders screaming at each other and trying to surrender first to save their own skins. He had seen it 1,000 times. The pattern never changed. But Earth did not panic. Instead, every screen on every Imperial ship lit up at the same moment. The humans had hacked into the Imperial communication system. This alone should have been impossible. The Imperium's codes were ancient and deep. No outside species had ever broken them. A woman appeared on the screens. She had dark skin and grey hair tied back in a simple knot. She wore a plain blue jacket. Her name, the translation system said, was Iona Reeves. She was the director of something called the United Earth Coalition. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She looked tired, like a parent dealing with a child who would not behave. High Magna Veshtul, she said. Her voice was calm. You have 72 hours to leave our system. We strongly recommend you take this offer. There will not be a second. Then she was gone. The screens returned to normal. Veshtul stared at the empty display for a long moment. Then he laughed. He laughed so hard his chest hurt. His officers laughed with him, though some of them looked uncertain. Did you hear that? Veshtul said, wiping his eyes. She gave us a deadline. The little human gave the Imperium a deadline. He shook his head. I have been doing this for 200 years. I have crushed 40 species, and this little planet thinks it can give me orders. He pointed at his weapons officer. Pick a small island, somewhere empty. Hit it with a low-power kinetic round. Just enough to make the ground shake. We will show these humans what a real warning looks like. The weapons officer nodded. He chose a small ring of islands in the middle of Earth's largest ocean. No people lived there. Just sand and birds. The perfect target for a demonstration. The kinetic round was a long metal spike, heavier than a mountain, fired from orbit at incredible speed. When it hit, it would explode with the force of a small nuclear weapon. Not enough to kill many beings, but enough to make every government on Earth understand that the Imperium meant business. Fire, Veshtul ordered. The weapon launched. It fell through space and entered Earth's upper atmosphere. The Imperial sensors tracked it perfectly. The trajectory was correct. The speed was correct. Everything was working exactly as planned. Then the spike disappeared. Not exploded. Not deflected. Not destroyed by some defense system the sensors could see. It simply stopped existing. 1 second it was there. The next second, it was gone. No flash. No debris. No energy signature. The bridge of the flagship went silent. Veshtul leaned forward in his chair. Run that again, he said quietly. His officers ran the recording 5 times. The result was always the same. The weapon entered Earth's atmosphere and ceased to exist at exactly 40 kilometers above the surface. Whatever did this had not been tracked, had not been detected, had not even been noticed until it acted. Fire another one, Veshtul said. Larger. Different angle. They fired 3 more rounds, each from a different ship, each at a slightly different target. All 3 vanished at the same altitude. Same precision. Same complete lack of any sign of how it was done. Veshtul felt something unfamiliar in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was a small, cold feeling. Just a tiny bit of something that might, if he was being honest, be called doubt. He pushed the feeling away. He was a high magnar of the Vorthani Imperium. He did not feel doubt. Hold position, he ordered. Run full scans of the planet. I want to know what just defended that island. Find me the weapon. Find me the satellite. Find me whatever it is. His officers worked for hours. They scanned every part of Earth and the space around it. They found cities, farms, ships, and small space stations. They found weather satellites and communication relays. They found everything you would expect to find around a young spacefaring world. They did not find any weapon that could have stopped those kinetic rounds. They did not find any energy source large enough. They did not find anything unusual at all. That was the most worrying part. Late that night, Veshtul sat alone in his private chamber. He poured another glass of wine and looked at the small blue planet on his viewing screen. 71 hours and 47 minutes remained on the human's deadline. He told himself it was a bluff. Some clever trick. Maybe the humans had one defensive system. Just one. And they had used it to scare him. He had 800 warships. He had reinforcements he could call. He had the entire Imperium behind him. But the cold feeling in his chest would not go away. On Earth, in a quiet office, in a quiet building, Iona Reeves drank a cup of tea. A young aide came in with a tablet. "Director," he said, "the Imperial fleet has not moved." She nodded. "They will not believe us yet. They never do. Should we send another warning?" She shook her head and took a slow sip of her tea. "No," she said. "We told them what would happen. Now we wait." Outside the window, the morning sun was rising over the city. It was going to be a beautiful day. Iona Reeves watched the light spread across the rooftops and thought about all the work that had come before this moment. 3 generations of quiet preparation. 3 generations of patience. The countdown continued. The Imperium did not yet understand what it had walked into. 12 hours passed. Then 24. Then 36. High Magnar Veshtul did not leave. Instead, he called for help. The message went out across subspace to the nearest Imperial bases. He requested 3 full battle crowns. Each battle crown was made of more than 1,000 ships. He was asking for over 4,000 warships to deal with one small planet. His staff officers were surprised. Some of them tried to hide it, but Veshtul could see it on their faces. A high magnar of his rank should never need that much help. To call for reinforcements was to admit that the situation was beyond his control. It was, in a small way, a confession of weakness. But Veshtul did not care. The cold feeling in his chest had grown. Something was wrong with this planet. Something was very wrong. And he would not be the commander who lost a fleet because he was too proud to ask for backup. While he waited for reinforcements, he ordered his intelligence division to dig deeper. He wanted to know everything about humans. Every record. Every report. Every small note in any Imperial archive that mentioned them. The work fell to a senior intelligence officer named Krell 9. Krell 9 was old, even by Vorthani standards. He had served the Imperium for 340 years. He had seen many strange things. But what he found in the archives over the next 2 days made his hand shake. He started with the obvious records. Earth had been first scouted by the Imperium 120 years ago. The scouts had filed a normal report. Tier 3 species. No threat. Maybe useful as a future labor world. Standard stuff. But Krell 9 kept digging. He looked at every Imperial ship that had passed near the Sol system in the past 2 centuries. There were 37 of them. All small expedition vessels doing routine work. Charting subspace currents. Mapping asteroid fields. Cataloging stars. Of those 37 ships, 12 had vanished. 12 ships gone without a trace. The official records said they had been lost to navigation accidents, stellar storms, or pirate attacks. But Krell 9 looked at the dates and locations. Every single missing ship had passed within 10 light-years of Earth. Every single one. The pattern was so clear that he could not believe nobody had seen it before. Then he understood. Nobody had seen it because nobody had bothered to look. Earth was not important. Earth was a backwater. Why would anyone connect a few lost ships to a planet of farmers? His hands shook harder. He kept digging. He started looking at communication patterns inside the Imperium itself. The Imperium ran on subspace transmissions. Every government office, every military base, every trade station sent constant streams of encrypted data through the network. The system was vast and old and considered completely secure. Krell 9 ran a special scan looking for unusual patterns. It took 6 hours. When the results came in, he sat in his chair for a long time without moving. There were transmissions hidden inside Imperial channels. Thousands of them. They were small, clever, almost invisible. They used the Imperium's own subspace network to send messages between distant points. The transmissions had been happening for at least 50 years. When he traced the pattern, he found something even worse. The hidden messages were going to and from Imperial core worlds. The capital, the military headquarters, the royal palace itself. Whoever was sending these messages was already deep inside the Imperium. They were not trying to break in. They were already there. And the message structure, when he ran it through his analysis tools, matched the data patterns of one species and one species only. Humans. Krell 9 stood up and walked out of his office. He went straight to High Magnar Vestal's command room. He did not stop to make an appointment. He did not knock. "Sir," he said, "we have a problem." He laid out everything he had found. The missing ships, the hidden transmissions, the fact that humans had been moving quietly through Imperial space for at least half a century. They had not been hiding from the Imperium because they were afraid. They had been hiding because they were preparing. Vestal listened without speaking. When Krell 9 finished, the High Magnar looked at his oldest intelligence officer for a long time. "How long?" Vestal finally asked. "How long have they known about us?" "At least 70 years, sir," Krell 9 said. "Maybe longer. Long enough that they have placed agents on every important world we control. And we never noticed. We never noticed." Vestal nodded slowly. He turned to look at Earth on his viewing screen. The little blue planet did not look like much, but he was beginning to understand that this had never been a fair fight. The humans had been studying the Imperium for generations. The Imperium had only learned the humans existed 5 years ago. While Vestal was having this difficult conversation, far across the galaxy, a young man named Theo Whitford was sitting in a small bar on a neutral trade station. Theo was 28 years old. He had short brown hair and a friendly smile. He worked as a junior diplomat, the kind of unimportant person nobody bothered to watch closely. His drink sat untouched in front of him. He was looking at his communicator. A small notice had just appeared on the secure channel. It said only, "Imperium has committed. Earth confronted. Awaiting your response." Theo took a long breath. He had trained for this moment for 10 years. He had never quite believed it would actually happen. Part of him had hoped it would not. He typed a single line back. "Begin Protocol Viridian." Then he deleted the message, finished his drink, paid his bill, and walked out of the bar. He had work to do. So did about 3,000 other humans scattered across every important world in the Imperium. They had been waiting a long time. The signal had finally come. Back in the Sol system, the 72-hour deadline ran out. High Magnar Vestal made his decision. The humans had embarrassed him. They had shown they had some kind of advanced defense, but he still had 800 warships. He still commanded the most powerful fleet in this part of the galaxy. He would not retreat. He would not be the High Magnar who ran from a Tier 3 species. "Prepare for full bombardment," he ordered. "Target their main cities. We end this now." The command went out. Across 800 warships, weapons officers prepared their kinetic rounds, plasma cannons, and missile batteries. Every weapon was charged. Every target was selected. Vestal gave the final order. "Fire." Nothing happened. The weapons did not jam. They did not malfunction. The officers all reported the same thing in tones of growing confusion and fear. Their weapons were at times empty. Every kinetic round, every missile, every plasma cell. The ammunition was simply time gone. As if it had never been loaded. As if it had never existed at all. A new transmission appeared on every screen. It was Iona Reeves again. She still looked tired, but now she also looked a little sad. "That was the warning," she said. "The repercussions begin now." The screen went dark, and somewhere in the depths of his chest, High Magnar Vestal finally understood that he had brought his fleet to the wrong fight. The repercussions did not look like war. That was the first thing the Imperium failed to understand. War was something the Vorthani knew well. War was fleets clashing in space. War was burning cities. War was loud and bloody and full of glory. Every Imperial commander had been trained for war. But the humans were not making war. They were doing something else. Something the Imperium had no name for and no defense against. It started small. In the first hour after the deadline passed, an Imperial subspace relay station in Sector 12 simply went dark. The station was old and reliable. It had been running for 2,000 years. Now it was silent. No alarm. No warning. No reason. Then another relay went dark. Then 6 more. Within 3 hours, every subspace relay in 3 sectors had stopped working. Half the Imperium's Western communication network was gone. Important worlds suddenly could not talk to each other. Government officers could not reach their commanders. Trade routes lost their guidance signals. And nobody knew why. The Imperial Engineering Corps tried to investigate. They sent ships to the dark relays. The ships found the stations intact. The power was on. The systems were running. But every memory bank had been wiped clean. Not damaged. Not hacked. Just times empty. As if the relays had never carried any data at all. While the engineers were still scratching their heads, the Royal Treasury on Vorth Prime sent an emergency message to the Emperor. The Treasury held the wealth of the Imperium. 40,000 years of gold, rare metals, and quantum-locked currency. The vaults were guarded by living soldiers, automated defenses, and security systems so complex that no thief had ever even attempted to break in. The vaults were empty. Not damaged. Not open. The vault doors were still sealed. The guards were still at their posts. The cameras showed nothing unusual had happened. But when the morning audit was performed, every single item was gone. Centuries of treasure vanished. The Emperor, an ancient Vorthani named Torakan, received the news while eating breakfast. He set down his fork. He thought about it for a long moment. Then he asked his servants to bring him his strategic advisors. While the Emperor was meeting with his advisors, the next wave hit. 12 client species declared independence at the same time. These were worlds the Imperium had conquered long ago. Some had been Imperial subjects for 10,000 years. Their declarations appeared on every Imperial channel at once, broadcast in perfect Vorthani using royal communication codes that should have been impossible to copy. Each declaration ended with the same line. Earth says we are free now. This was, somehow, the most frightening part. Earth had not asked these worlds to declare independence. Earth had not negotiated with them. Earth had simply times given them permission, and they had accepted, and somehow they all knew it was the right moment to act. The Emperor began to understand the shape of the problem. While all this was happening, in a small office building in Geneva, an old man named Dr. Marcus Hale was watching a wall of screens. The screens showed status reports from across the galaxy. Green lights for systems still in human hands. Yellow lights for active operations. Red lights for things that had been completed. The screens were turning red one after another in a careful pattern. Dr. Hale had been running the Quiet Hand for 40 years. The Quiet Hand was not a military organization. It had no fleet. It had no soldiers. What it had was time for people. 3,000 humans who had spent their entire careers working their way into Imperial systems. They were not spies in the traditional sense. They were technicians, accountants, translators, and maintenance workers. The boring people that nobody noticed. The ones who fixed the air filters and updated the software and processed the paperwork. Over 50 years, they had become essential to the Imperium's daily operation. The Imperium had let them in because they were useful. The Imperium had trusted them because they were never important enough to suspect. And now, they were turning the lights off. A young woman named Sarah Chen was working on Vorth Prime, the Imperial capital. Officially, she was a junior data clerk in the Planetary Records Office. She had been there for 6 years. She was polite, hardworking, and utterly forgettable. Her Vorthani supervisor liked her because she never complained and always finished her work on time. That afternoon, Sarah Chen calmly entered a sequence of commands into her workstation. She had memorized the sequence 10 years ago, back when she was still in training on Earth. She had never used it. She had been waiting for this day. The commands triggered a chain reaction in the planetary record system. Every government file on Vorth Prime began to corrupt itself. Tax records, property deeds, military rosters, citizenship documents, The entire bureaucratic memory of the imperial capital, gone in 11 minutes. Sarah picked up a bag, walked out of the office, and went to the spaceport. She had a ticket on a transport ship leaving in 2 hours. By the time anyone realized what had happened, she would be gone. Across the galaxy, 3,000 other humans were doing similar things. Not all of them were destroying systems. Some were copying files. Some were unlocking doors. Some were simply walking away from positions they had held for decades, leaving important work undone at the worst possible moment. The Imperium began to understand what humanity had done. For 40,000 years, the Vorthani had built their empire on conquest. They sent fleets. They demanded surrender. They installed governors. They extracted resources. The pattern always worked because the pattern was based on overwhelming force, and the Imperium always had more force than anyone else. The humans had looked at this system and asked a different question. They had asked, what holds this empire together? And the answer was not the fleets. The fleets were the visible part, the loud part, the part that scared people. But what really kept the Imperium running was 1,000 small things. Communication networks, supply chains, tax records, maintenance workers, the boring infrastructure of governance. So, while the Vorthani were building bigger ships, the humans had been quietly putting their hands on the small things, the boring things, the things nobody bothered to defend. Now, they were squeezing. In the solar system, High Magnar Veshtul tried to leave. He gave the order to retreat. His fleet's jump drives powered up. The navigators entered coordinates for the nearest Imperial base. The fleet jumped. It arrived back in Earth orbit. The navigators tried again. They entered different coordinates, different routes, different destinations. Each time, the fleet jumped, and each time, it ended up exactly where it had started, in orbit around Earth. After the 7th attempt, Veshtul stopped trying. He sat in his command chair and stared at the blue planet on his screen. His fleet had fuel for 3 centuries. It had supplies for 2 years. It had nowhere to go. A small, unarmed shuttle launched from Earth's surface and flew toward his flagship. It requested permission to dock. It carried 1 passenger. Veshtul granted the permission. He had a feeling he knew who was coming. He stood up, smoothed his uniform, and went to meet the human envoy. Behind him, the cold feeling in his chest had become something larger, something he could no longer pretend to ignore. It was, he realized, the feeling of an empire learning that it was not as eternal as it had believed. The shuttle docked with the Imperial flagship at exactly 14 minutes past noon, Vorthani Standard Time. High Magnar Veshtul stood in the docking bay with a full honor guard, 12 elite soldiers in ceremonial armor, weapons raised in formal salute. It was the greeting reserved for important diplomats. He had not decided whether to honor the human or simply to remind her of his power. He told himself it was both. The shuttle door opened. Iona Reeves walked out alone. She wore the same plain blue jacket she had worn in her broadcasts. She carried a small bag over one shoulder. She was unarmed. She did not even bring an aide. The honor guard tried to follow protocol. They tried to raise their weapons in the formal salute. The weapons did not respond. 12 ceremonial rifles, all silent. 12 soldiers who had been trained for this moment for years, suddenly looking confused and uncertain. Reeves did not seem to notice. She walked past them as if they were furniture. She nodded politely to Veshtul. "Hi Magnar," she said. "Thank you for seeing me. Shall we talk somewhere private?" Veshtul led her to his war room. It was the most secure space on the flagship. The walls were 2 m thick. The doors were guarded by automated systems. The room was designed so that no enemy could ever reach it. He gestured for her to sit. She sat at A. He sat across from her. She set her small bag on the table and took out a single object. It was a clear crystal about the size of a thumb. She placed it carefully between them. "This is for you," she said. "Or rather, for your emperor. I will explain what is on it. But first, I would like to talk." Veshtul looked at the crystal. It looked very ordinary. He had no idea what it contained. "Talk then," he said. His voice came out harder than he had meant. Reeves nodded. She folded her hands on the table. "My species does not want an empire," she said. "We never have. We looked at what your people built, and we did not want anything like it. We do not want to rule other worlds. We do not want tribute. We do not want to make other species into our servants. We just want to be left alone. Veshtul opened his mouth to speak. She held up one hand politely and continued. 70 years ago, our scientists detected your scout ships near our system. We watched them come and go. We listened to their transmissions. We learned your language and your codes. And we made a decision. We decided that one day your Imperium would come for us, the way it had come for so many others. We could not match your fleets. We could not build warships fast enough. So, we chose a different path. She tapped the crystal lightly with one finger. We sent our people out, quiet people, ordinary people, people who would never look like a threat. We placed them in your systems, your cities, your ships, your offices. We taught them to be patient. We taught them to be useful. We taught them to wait. Veshtul felt the cold feeling in his chest spreading. He kept his face still. For 3 generations, Reeve said softly, we have been preparing for this conversation. We did not want to have it. We hoped you would simply leave us alone. But you came anyway. And now we are here. She pushed the crystal across the table toward him. This crystal contains the keys to your empire. Every back door we have placed in your systems, every official we have compromised, every piece of infrastructure that we can turn off remotely. The power grids on 300 core worlds, the life support systems on every Imperial flagship, including this one. The food production networks on your agricultural colonies. The genetic archives that maintain your breeding programs. The neural implants that connect your emperor to his royal council. Veshtul stared at the crystal. All of it? He asked. His voice was very quiet. All of it, Reeve said. Veshtul looked up at her. For the first time in his long career, he looked at another being and saw something he could not defeat. Not by force. Not by cleverness. Not by anything he had been trained to use. What do you want? He asked. I want to give your emperor 3 choices, Reeve said. I want you to take this crystal to him, explain what it contains, and let him decide which choice to make. She held up one finger. First choice. The Imperium withdraws completely from a 50 light-year sphere around our sun. You recognize human sovereignty over our space. You stop sending ships into our system. In return, we remove ourselves from your infrastructure. We return your treasury. We restore your communication networks. The Imperium continues to exist. You lose nothing but a small piece of empty space you never controlled anyway. She held up a second finger. Second choice. Your emperor refuses. In which case, every system we have touched fails at the same time. Power grids go dark. Life support stops working. Communication networks die. Food production halts. Government records vanish. The Imperium ends in one afternoon. There will be no battles. There will be no glorious last stands. There will only be lights going out all across the galaxy until nothing is left. She held up a third finger. Her face became very still. Third choice. You attack Earth again. In which case, we stop being patient. Veshtul waited for her to explain. She did not explain. She simply lowered her hand and watched him with calm, dark eyes. He understood that she was not going to tell him what the third choice meant. He understood, also, that this was the most frightening of the 3. The first 2 were terrible, but knowable. The third was a door that humans would not open unless someone made them, and he did not want to be the person who made them. He thought about his emperor. He thought about his career. He thought about 40,000 years of unbroken imperial conquest and how it might end this afternoon in this small room because of a woman in a blue jacket. How long do we have to decide? He asked. 12 hours, Reeve said. Make it 24. The emperor is old. He needs time to think clearly. She considered this. Then she nodded. 24 hours, she said. We are not in a hurry. She stood up. She picked up her small bag. She left the crystal on the table. Tell your emperor something for me, she said as she walked toward the door. Tell him that we did not want this. Tell him that we tried to be left alone. Tell him that if he chooses the first option, we will keep our word and your Imperium will never hear from us again. We do not want to be your enemies. We just want to go home. She paused at the door. And tell him one more thing. Tell him that if he chooses the second option, we will not enjoy it. We will do it, but we will not enjoy it. We are not your people, High Magna. We do not take pleasure in the suffering of others." She walked out. Veshtul sat alone in the war room for a long time, staring at the small crystal on the table. Then he picked it up very carefully and went to find a long-range communicator. He had a difficult message to send to his emperor. Emperor Tor Akan received the crystal at the start of his evening meal. He was sitting in his private dining hall, eating quietly with his oldest advisor. The room was small by royal standards, with high windows that looked out over the capital city. The emperor preferred to eat without ceremony when he could. He was 412 years old, and the ceremony had stopped impressing him long ago. A messenger brought the crystal in a sealed metal case. Veshtul's report came with it, transmitted by long-range subspace beacon. The emperor read the report carefully. He examined the crystal. He listened as his technicians explained what was on it. When they finished, he sat in silence for several minutes. His advisor, a woman named Kalshara, who had served 3 emperors, did not interrupt him. She knew his thinking face. Finally, he spoke. "How many of our worlds have they touched?" he asked. "All of them, Your Majesty," the senior technician said. "Every world we control. Every important system. Every piece of critical infrastructure. And we never noticed. We never noticed." The emperor nodded slowly. He looked out the high windows at his capital city. The lights were beautiful in the evening. They had been beautiful for 40,000 years. He thought about all those lights going dark. "Send my response," he said quietly. "I choose the first option." We withdrew. His advisor leaned forward in surprise. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider there is nothing to consider, Kalshara." His voice was tired, but firm. "The humans have already won. They won before we knew there was a war. The only question is whether the Imperium continues to exist, or whether I will become the last emperor of the Vothani because I was too proud to admit I had been outmaneuvered." He turned to look at her. "I am old. I have ruled for 200 years. I will not be the one who ends our empire over a piece of empty space." He stood up from his chair. "Send the order. Withdraw all forces from the Sol exclusion zone. Recognize human sovereignty. Begin the formal ceremony at dawn." Incident? Was it about military preparedness? About intelligence gathering? About the dangers of underestimating new species? Krell 9 considered the question. He looked out the window of the classroom at the stars beyond. He thought about all the things he could say. The clever lessons, the strategic principles, the careful analysis. He decided to say none of those things. "The lesson," he said quietly, "is that some species ask to be left alone, and when they do, for the love of every god your people have ever named, you leave them alone." The cadet looked confused. "But surely there is more to it than that, Professor. Surely we should learn how to defend against another species like humans in case we meet one." Krell 9 smiled. It was a small, sad smile. "You are missing the point, young officer. The humans were polite about it. They warned us. They gave us a chance. They offered us a way out. They even kept their word when we accepted it." He shook his old head slowly. "We were lucky. The next species we meet may not be humans. They may not warn us. They may not give us a chance. They may not be polite at all." He turned to face the class. "So, when a species asks you calmly and clearly to leave them alone, you do not laugh at them. You do not test them. You do not send your fleets to teach them their place. You bow politely and you go home. And you thank whatever gods you believe in that they were patient enough to ask." The classroom was silent. Krell 9 looked at his students for a long moment. Then he turned back to his lesson plan. "Now," he said, "open your textbooks to Chapter 14. We will continue our discussion of post-imperial diplomacy." Outside the classroom windows, the stars went on shining, indifferent to empires. Far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet in a quiet system, humans went about their day. They worked. They argued. They laughed. They made dinner. They watched the sun go down. They lived their ordinary lives in the way they had always wanted to live them. They were left alone. That was all they had ever asked for.